When was the plan to have the draft available?
What draft?
MOQ.
Oh, we'll let
Yeah, okay.
we'll
I will wait
Alan,
until the end of the meeting. So
yeah.
So
Okay, it's time to start. Welcome everybody to our usually bi-weekly, but not this time, interim meeting. This is the IETF Notewell. I think most of you are familiar with it, but basically it summarizes the intellectual property and code of conduct implications of you participating. So if you're unfamiliar with those items and would like to learn more, by all means, you can click the links in the slides or just type the relevant keywords into a search engine of your choice. We're into, I think, month 2 of the Meet Echo experiment. I think Magnus would agree that it's going relatively well. For those of you who might not be familiar with how we do this, if you want to speak, enter the mic queue by raising your hand with the button at the bottom of your screen. There's also a show of hands tool that in the Meet Echo client allows you to raise your hand when we ask for sort of a count of people that agree or disagree with something. Please mute your audio and turn off your video unless you are speaking in some way, shape, or form, or if you're in a high tempo conversation. Know that there is about a second of latency when you choose to unmute yourself. So give yourself a little time before you are planning to talk to unmute yourself. And because of some echo cancellation properties of this tool, please do use a headset if you possibly can, so your speakers aren't feeding back on another channel. We do need a scribe for today. Is anyone willing to do so? Could speak up or just say something in the chat. Contrary to what this slide says, we don't need a Zoom relay. I think as chairs, we're able to monitor the chat pretty well.
I joined late. Are we waiting for scribe?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do our, if you aren't a chair, aren't an editor, and you didn't take notes last time, it's you.
Okay.
Okay, this is Will. I'll scribe. I don't think I have issues today.
Thank you, Will. All right, this is the agenda, which I accidentally posted in micro font there. We're in the administrivia portion of the day. Colin asked for some time to talk about params and present an alternate vision for how that could work. I don't see he's on the call yet, so we might rearrange things here. Alan, oh, there he is. Look at that, just on time. Then Alan will talk briefly about the plan for draft 14, and then we'll then spend the balance of the time on PRs. I would actually like to self-batch this and just have Alan just do his draft 14 talk immediately, since it seems short and relevant. Are people comfortable with that?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
And maybe we'll throw one more bash in there, which is, do we want to spend any time talking about agenda items for hybrid?
I don't know.
yes, or at least I want to solicit them. So please submit agenda items. I think that's what you think is important. But if you have anything you think you want to discuss here, we think we can spend a few minutes on it. But
the other administrative item I'd like to bring up is an email onto the list sometime this week, asking from Emily from Cisco, asking if you're planning to attend the Toronto interim in person. If you are, please respond to that so we can get a good count. Don't forget, look at your email.
I think it's so you get into the building.
Yeah. Okay, so since nobody objected to the bash, Alan, just go ahead and take your 5 minutes and let's talk about interop. Somebody mute.
Okay. For some reason, Mute Echo would not capture my camera device, so you can't see my lovely face. I got a growth spurt, and I'm now 10 inches taller. So what I want to talk about draft 14. So I would like to cut it about 3 weeks before interop to give people a chance to catch. There's not a ton of wire format changes that are in right now compared to 12. There's a few in 13 and I think a few in 14, but it's not huge right now. I don't know if that'll change, but the 3 weeks before would be Monday, which is a holiday. So probably Tuesday is when I would plan to do this cut. So is there any, and we can look at the list of PRs that are outstanding if there's like particular wire changes people want to interop on or want to get in. Think we need to prioritize. I guess I just wanted to solicit feedback. Let me pause for a second. Does anybody have anything that they want definitely in that they want to implement for 14 or something they're like, please don't put that in. There's no way I'll implement it in time.
I wouldn't say this is a desperate need, but I can probably land the request error PR. I just have to spend an hour working on it based on the comments that you and Colin submitted. If people really don't want that, we can also not do that.
Yeah, I don't think that will not be a problem for me, but I don't know about other folks, or I'm not sure I see a lot of other implementers on the call right now. So,
I think again, this is not a must, but I have some prototype to work on the multi-publisher one. So clarifying that one, the PR that is almost ready, I think. So nice to land if can get everyone on board with it.
Yeah, I don't think that changes the must for multi-publisher. I don't believe that changes the wire format. It sort of changes relay behavior.
Right. Yeah.
And as far as I know, I think that's just waiting for a stamp from Ian. I believe all the other authors have stamped it, and the feedback's all been addressed.
Cool. Thank you.
So I think that should make it. Okay. In that case, hearing no particular opinions, we will just use our best discretion. But if you see something that you really want to land in the next 5 days that has met all the criteria, please surface it. And if there's something like, don't land this. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the plan for interop itself. We had originally talked about having 2 days there, but and I think I was one of the champions because we've noticed that in 1 day we're not getting a lot of traction. But my schedule is such that I won't be in Toronto until like probably at the office at 4 p.m. on Monday. So I am more interested, like if we can do a later, like an evening interop, like that would work better for me than on Monday. And then on Tuesday, there's going to be like some PR writing happening by the editor. So I'm not sure like if other people have plans for interop they want to talk about, but that's what would work for me.
Look, I will say I think we can make sure there's access to the building at whatever times people want. I'm sort of saying that without knowing how I'm going to do it, but like I will do my best to make sure that we have some plan for whatever availability people need.
Okay, thanks. I guess we'll see what happens when we get closer, or maybe I can send an email to the list. As long as I have as long as you think it's possible, I can ask on the list, like, does anybody want to do this this way? All right. I think that's all I wanted to talk about on this topic, so I can give it over to Colin.
Lovely. Thanks. Go ahead, Colin. Can you request the screen share again?
Okay. Let's see. Request screen share there. I just requested. Let's see if that worked this time.
Let me see if I can do anything with it. Colin, we're getting a lot of echo from your speaker.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me start the screen share and then I'll try and deal with the echo.
Okay. I don't understand what's happening. Oh, that worked. Okay. Take it away.
Let me just try and deal with echo for a second here. I don't know why this would be happening on echo, but let me see if I can switch things around to solve it somehow. Am I still getting a lot of echo?
I can try speaking to see if it's yeah.
I'm on a sort of normal Mac notebook. I'm not quite sure what else to try here. Give me.
Maybe try headphones because the audio has to be somehow.
Yeah, I'm sure headphones would work. I'm trying to figure out whether I have any headphones. No, those are Lightning. Do not think.
It's not, as long as no one else talks, it's not bad. Like
Okay.
if everyone else moves except for you.
Look, I'll try and mute when other people are talking too, so that it doesn't, so we can reduce the impact of it. So this is not great how to figure out how to make it go full screen either. So I'm sort of, we started talking about the, no, how does that get it to fit? So we started talking about this model of the parameters, but a lot of that came down to, I realized as I was listening to Ian talk in particular, it's like, this is actually, we don't have a really good story about what our thoughts on extensibility are. And that is really impacting this discussion. So what I started to try and do was write up a little bit of like, hey, what's my alternative proposal for sort of how we decide what's parameters, what's not parameters. And really, you can't discuss that without discussing the whole extensibility. So one of the things that I thought we've needed for a long time is, hey, what's our extensibility story with this protocol overall? So I've tried to address the issues where I think we have extensibility, put some proposals together for what the extensibility should be, and then as part of that, answer the question about the parameters, which actually comes up something closer to what Ian was proposing than what I was originally proposing anyway. But I think that the logic is much more reasoned of sort of how we should get here and driven from an extensibility point of view. So that's sort of what I wanted to accomplish today. I'm not sure I will see questions while I'm talking here. So if questions come up, somebody stop me, chairs, whatever. First of all, I just wanted, this is a couple terms I'm going to use and when I'm talking about them today. I'm not proposing we changed all the drafts to have these terms. We don't really have terms for this or whatever. But when I talk about protocol version, I'm really talking about like, hey, it's MOQ 1.0 or 1.2, and it's probably with the ALPN. Like that's sort of the version of the protocol with the assumption that there'd be another RFC that changed the version of the protocol, that type of level of it. Then we have extensibility at the commands level. So this is like what Alan calls verbs, but it's like subscribe, update, sorry, not update, subscribe, fetch. I mean, that's what I mean by a command. And then inside of commands, we have a bunch of things. We have a bunch of values that get put along with it, like track name or priority. And I'm calling those fields. We've also called those parameters at sometimes, but sometimes parameters refer to some of them, but not others. But I'm just talking about all that when you send a command, there's a bunch of fields in it. And each one of those fields has a value. So that's what I mean by fields and values. And look, all of these are possible extensibility points. And I'll talk about each one of them as we go through here a little bit more. So protocol extensibility. This is obviously, the last resort extensibility. We revved it from TLS 1.2 to 1.3. So there's some of this, and I think that this is an important thing. We need to be able to have this and move it forward and expect that that's a reasonable way that people can add new things and negotiate what they are. So for this, we need a way of signaling what protocols you support. We have that. Mechanism for servers to know what the client supports and choose the best one and signal back the usual thing that you would expect on version negotiation. We probably have that. Some protocols want to be able to do that even when the TLS was stripped off. Others don't. Whatever. I mean, there might be some nuances here, but I think we have that level of extensibility. The next thing is sort of where the commands. And we have a couple different ways that we might make extension commands. We might decide that, we're going to make a new subscribe that's a new version of the protocol has a new subscribe v2, and it's more or less like subscribe v1, except it's got some more fields or has removed some fields or those types of things. We might also decide that we have a special variant of it. We still have the original subscribe v1, but we also have, subscribe with ABR or something like that. And you've already seen us doing that in sort of merging the fetch and subscribe thing. So obviously adding new commands is a really key way of doing it. I, of course, think that we should have, for new commands, we should have IANA registry. There'd be different code points and values assigned to that some sort of way. But this is something that an extension that, only dealt with a type thing might be able to add a new point on this. Now, one of the problems that we have about this is what do relays, the negotiating support for commands from the original publisher and original subscriber are a little bit easier to do, but particularly on what relays are in the middle is very hard to do. So we have this sort of what things do these commands need to be things that the relays need to understand. And so the proposal that I'm putting forward, next slide here, on this is that we shouldn't be just, every time we get a slight whim, we make a, new command or a new version of the command, that we don't let this totally explode, but that we do add them where it's the right, where we don't have another thing to do. And that basically a given version of the protocol will specify the mandatory to understand commands for relays. Some of the commands a relay, it might never make any sense for a relay. But if the relay needs to understand what the command is or what to do, which is probably every command that we have today and probably most commands in the future, then basically you need to rev the protocol if you're adding new commands. So that's my first recommendation here. I don't know. I think I'd like to sort of go through all of these and then maybe come back to the recommendations, discuss pros, cons of what we could do on these various things, because I think people sort of need to see the whole picture. So jumping through to, and let me just check, are people still, I'm not seeing anyone else on video, so I want to make sure people are still hearing me. Yeah, okay.
Hearing
cool.
you fine.
Okay, good. Okay, so fields extensibility, and this this gets into the parameters discussion that started this whole presentation, right? So one of the problems with just constantly having optional new fields that you add to things is if they interact with each other, you can end up with this sort of exponential set of test conditions of all the different variations of fields that you need to add together. And so this particularly happens with optional fields. We've seen some of this in the past. And so because of that, I'm trying to differentiate the fields that are mandatory for relays to understand and the ones that are optional for relays to understand. It's easy to imagine lots of fields which a relay would never look at. They're really meant for end-to-end delivery. And then there's other ones that are, key to the, cache times or something like that, that are absolutely fundamental to the operation of the relays. Mostly talking about how this hits relays here. So I separate between those mandatory and optional ones. And I'm trying to keep things to understand that some of these fields interact with all the other fields in the command, and others don't. So, oops, I'm trying to forward on my slides on the wrong on Meet Echo. Okay, so my view on fields, if they're going to be optional, and I'll talk about encoding of them later if they're optional required, okay? But they're optional, they need to be sort of orthogonal functionality to the rest of the things so that they don't create an exponential test. They don't change how other parts of the command work very much. They're just a unique thing. So a cat token is a pretty good example of this. Like, yeah, I mean, it might change whether the command happens or not, whether you have the cat token, but it really doesn't, it's not like text that's over describing how the queuing or priorities work in any way is changed by this. Where something like the forwarding preferences might impact lots of different things on that. So, and I agree it's sort of subjective, but I'm trying to get to those types of things. So one, fields optionals need to be orthogonal. And you know, they're also, if they're optional, it has to be fine for a relay to be unaware of it, not implement it, not understand it. It doesn't mean there might be some relays that could use it, but it has to be, the whole system has to still function if relays don't understand that. So fields meet those if they don't meet that requirement, they're a required field. So then on how we encode these fields and play with, well, actually move to values. So with values, I'm going to use filter types here as a good example of like, we've got a couple filter types. You could easily imagine that somebody might later want to add another filter type, and we could do that. And, you know, the question is then what do the old relays that didn't understand how to deal with this deal with it? So again, I think this one comes back to a given version of the protocol needs to list the values that are mandatory for the relay to understand, and it can also list a range that it's optional that the relays can ignore, right? You know, and have some behavior that's defined when they don't understand the value. Maybe like you ask for a filter that's just not possible, or falls back to a different filter, or something like that. But one way or another, when we write a relay, we have to have enough information to know how to implement this for even extensibility. So I think with value extensibility, we can have them. We just need to be able to make sure that the parts that are required to implement are defined as required in that version of the protocol. On default values, this is mostly about compression, not anything else. It's about how we make the messages shorter. So I prefer, once we're talking about that, I really prefer that, you know, we have common values, because often from a compression point of view, you have two very common values, or you have the issue that in one deployment, a common value is 0, but in another deployment, the common value is 1. And values outside of 0 or 1 are very unusual, or something like that. Like it's easy to imagine different values like that when we're talking about these default values. So there are things though where we have a single common value that is used, and we might want to take advantage of that in a compression point of view. Mostly for compression of text messages, of the messages that are the control messages that are in these commands, I don't think it's that valuable. I don't get too wound up about it, but it's an optimization that can be made. And since people seem to want to go down that way, I've sort of suggested that. So here's how I'm suggesting encoding the fields and their values. For mandatory required fields, if there's more than one common value for them, then we just basically put in the values. Like these fields, you know, they will always be in the command. They'll always be encoded. There's just a list of them, and you know, they come in a given order. You know that the first one's track name, the second one's a track is priority or whatever they are, and they have two values. And so we'll just encode the values. If there's a common value, then we fall into this category of ones that people want to admit, can be admitted. So on those ones, we basically encode them as a tag that says whether they're there now or not. So let's take priority. Let's say we agree the common value is 127. Lots of people don't even use it, so it can be omitted. So we'd have a tag that indicated what it was, and then we'd have the value. We don't need a length because it's defined in the protocol. We know what, you know, we know that the length of that is a varint, and we know how to deal with it. Now, and look, if the value was a string, then obviously the string itself would have a length, but that's separate. That's the value has a length embedded inside of it, not that we need a generic length of what you're going to step over. Now, for optional fields, the relay may not have even known about this when it was implemented. It was optional and it could be extended later. And so the length's not necessarily known. So on these ones, we need to encode them as a tag, then a length and a value. Now, I'm encoding that we do these, you know, value only fields first, then the tag value fields ordered by tag, then the tag length value fields ordered by tag. And by ordered by tag, I just mean the value of the tag. I mean, I think we need some ordering helps accelerate the parsing of these in many cases, and it seemed people wanted to sort of lean towards that. So that's what I'm proposing on those. To give an example of this, so here's a subscribe. The track namespace and the track name, those would both just be value encoded. Along, because they're required and they don't have a common value, along with filter type and the forwarding value. And look, we can argue whether there's common value for forwarding value or not. I'm not really wound up about that here. I'm just sort of coming up with things. Authorization token is optional, so it would have a tag and a value. It's an example of the value does encode a length because the values can be different lengths. And subscriber priority and group order, I've showed in this area that there's one common value of 128. And this particular scribe didn't have anyone, so they're just both admitted from the encoding. I'm not going to go through these right now, but I took a sort of run at what I think are the sort of parameters of our existing fields, like whether what the required, whether they're optional to be required or something. And this would help us. I'm not claiming 100% of these are right or anything like this. Like some of them, like particularly the single common value, is easy to argue about one way or another. We'd have to come up with some agreement on that for the various things. But once we agree on that, then if we go back to the value encoding, we have an algorithm for how to do it. So let me stop there and take questions first on just sort of like, hey, do people get what I'm proposing? And then we'll move to like, is this a reasonable proposal or not? Alan, I think you're up.
Okay, remember to mute. Okay, so can you roll forward one slide? I guess my question is, are you proposing that we remove parameters and as they currently exist entirely, or are you somehow saying that there's the ones that are using value encoding are the fields like we have them today, and then the ones that are either tag value or tag length value are what we now call parameters?
I mean, I think that I was trying to leave somewhat that spelling to the editors, but the ones that are tag length values basically come to what we call parameters right now. It's exactly it. And I'm sort of introducing another type, which, I mean, maybe they're called short parameters that are just a tag value or something. But like, I'm sort of introducing another category here of the tag value versus just value and tag length value. And I'm not wound up about whether we call those parameters or how we spell it or any of those things. What I'm trying to get at is the theory of how we determine which one of these three categories each thing's in.
Okay, so I mean, I think it's important that we have some section which is like extensible in some way. Like I think you mentioned earlier, like parameters that aren't even for relays, they're somehow for the endpoint, and like therefore like there needs to be something that's tag based so that you can stick whatever you want in there without necessarily negotiating. It's more application and not requiring a new version of MOQ. It's just like you've like an HTTP header. Like I put something in here and I just know it's going to the other end. So I think that's important. Otherwise, I think
there we go.
Like I think it's okay to have some things that are mandatory and some like the ones that are baked in and ones that are optional. I think that. Yeah. Okay. I'll collect more thoughts. We'll let someone else talk.
So Alan, to reply back to you, like, look, yes, I definitely contemplate this optional fields. They have a TLV corresponding to our current parameters. Any one of our commands could have optional fields. But what I am suggesting is that we have a strategy for determining what's optional or not. And I believe that that's one of the things that was lacking from HTTP at some level is like because HTTP wasn't designed for intermediaries, what winds of the headers intermediaries needed to understand or not understand was always semi-undefined. And like, knowing whether your cache really supported all the versions of eTags or not was always sort of impossible to tell, right? Like, so I want to try and have us by design ourselves out of some of the problems that turned out to be problematic with HTTP headers. Does that make sense? But I'm definitely allowing exactly what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And I think it's, I guess I like your distinction too of like, we were saying like, is there a reasonable default? But like in some cases there might be a default, but it may not be common, or like there may be, like forward's a good example where it's like, I really don't know. Like, is the most common value going to be 0 or 1, or is it going to vary? And so I think that it's an interesting way to slice it.
Yeah, and a year from now, before we publish this MOQ as an RFC, we may have a much better answer to whether forward 1 or 0 is most common, like, yeah. Victor.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I was going to make an important, so there are 3 parameters in MOQ that I can think of, like really common, the setup parameters, the subscription parameters, and the extensions on objects, and we currently encode them the same way, but that is not necessarily true. Good idea, and I will elaborate why. So setup parameters have to be encoded the way they're currently encoded, because when you do setup, you don't know what parameters you're going to do. Now, for subscribe parameters, MOQ has a very important distinction from HTTP, in that so in HTTP you send a bunch of headers to like reverse proxy that can then forward all of those headers to the backend, or to another layer of reverse proxy or forward proxy, or etc. But in MOQ, we generally say that relays do not forward parameters upstream, and that is because you can send a subscribe to the relay, and then you say subscribe to the relay, and the relay then has thousands of clients subscribe to the same feed. It does not need to send anything to the backend. So because of this many-to-one aggregation, we basically cannot forward unknown parameters. And if they're not unknown, that means any parameters that we introduce are somehow for changing the behavior on the hop between the subscriber and the relay. And what this basically means is we don't need optional fields in subscription, because I would much rather us negotiate what we support in the setup message. And once we negotiate that in the setup message, what this basically means, like we know in advance what's supported and what's not. And this gets rid of this really obnoxious problem in HTTP where you can add header, but you always have to deal with the fact that the header. Okay, Alan makes a good point that this is true for subscribe, but not for publish, and I agree. I guess I forgot there are 4 types of parameters, and I'll have to think what this means for publish.
I mean, I think you're basically right. Optional parameters are going to be basically unusable in subscribe, right?
Hello. Thanks for pointing that out, Victor. I think that's an interesting observation. I think I need to think about it more, but I do like the idea of recognizing that the difference between like subscribe being in some sense like a hop by hop, subscriber to publisher transaction, whereas the content and the objects flowing over this network are more similar to end-to-end, object concept, I think, from HTTP. And I like the idea. I like the idea of TV from the perspective of, somewhat from the perspective of density, but mostly from punishing people for like using things that like they shouldn't be using because I have no idea what it means. It's very much an enforcement mechanism in my mind. So I think it's a good innovation and a good addition. And I think maybe, at least I would like to go back and do some of the thinking I think Victor just started to do, which is kind of figure out like where we can get by with only those, or where, kind of like how to best use that new bit of functionality that you're suggesting. But I'm conceptually like for it. I think we just need to like kind of figure out how to best use this new tool to our benefit, maybe.
So other thoughts on this direction as a way of sort of setting up our, so forming some PRs that encode this, figure out how to describe this in the draft, and put this sort of general thing on it, and this sort of, sort of general approach to thinking about which things are encoded various ways. And Victor, I think you're still in the queue, but.
Do you want to maybe roll forward to some of your example slides, Colin, and see if that like generates a little bit more, maybe not that one, but or the ones where you're going through all the fields, and just kind of see if there's anything that makes people, or the ones that you thought might be controversial in terms of deciding.
Yeah, I mean, so these ones can show up in all messages, maybe, or maybe I don't have that quite right. But other ones, let's go through these sort of, command at a time, like subscribe. These are the ones that seem to make sense there, or these are the fields that seem to make sense there. I think having a single common value or not for both filter type and forward are arguable, like those two right there. I don't have strong opinions on that one way or another. Like a filter type, a default filter type of none, and a forward of yes would certainly be arguable, and that would change how we encode those fields slightly. People want me to move to the next command or talk about this one? What's people's thoughts here?
Just since I left myself in the queue, I'll say that like filter type none as a default or as a common value seems fine to me. And like, I'm unsure how I feel about forward, but the rest seems fine.
Right. Oh, okay. I think that forward we're going to get a bunch of experience of over the next little while here. It's fairly recent into the protocol. Let's put TBD. Subscribe update. I'll do the same thing, TBD here. Love thoughts on other ones.
So the subscribe update is one of the things that got us here in the first place, particularly because you might want to update something about the subscription without updating other things about the subscription, in which case the column, is it optional for the relay to understand, is different from, is it optional for the sender of the update to put in if they don't want to change it. And the key one would be, I sent you a subscribe, and I don't have much more with priority X, and then I suddenly realize I want priority Y, and I haven't heard back yet. So I don't necessarily know what the location that I want to put in there is or not, but I know that I want to change the priority, or I know I want to change forward.
Okay, so you're saying that, so you're saying that that is actually a new value for start location, for all of these values, which is I don't want to change it, right? Like subscribe update has a very clear
to update and not to any other command.
Right. So, but keep in mind, that's one of the things that I think that should be one of the values that's encodable as start location, though, so that we have an internal representation of that, of no change. And
yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to spell it. The way we could have a the question is just like, what do we like? It's just a beauty contest in terms of what that message looks like on the wire. How do you encode? I'm not changing the start location.
Right, but understand in the implementation that receives that message, the I didn't see a subscriber priority, so I just encode in my internal data structures that the subscriber priority was 128 because it was simply compression. And that's what no subscriber priority meant, is that it was 128, is different than there was no end location. So the common value of that meant end location not specified, not end location, like we need an end location not specified value in our encoding of that to be able to just express that in the subscribe update. So that's sort of all I'm trying to sort of get at is on those, how we do that. Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying. I think like if you look at the PR or one of the PRs that Ian has put up around here, the idea is like, and because end group is now a parameter, it's very easy to say it's there or it's not there because it shows up in that tag section instead of in the fixed section. So we could put it in the fixed section with special encoding value that tells you it's here, but it's not here. Or we can put it in the TLV section or the TV section that says it's there if it's there and it's not there if it's not there.
I think but that's one of the things that I think we need to come down on a very consistent strategy on is, the subscriber priority here seems like the best example to drive this one to home, right? Is like, subscriber priority not being there, is that a shorthand for I compressed it out and I mean the value is 128? Or is that a shorthand for I mean don't change it? We can't have it mean both things. That's my point.
Okay, I completely agree. And there's actually potentially a third option for update in particular, which is the original filter had an end group, and I want to now remove it and make this an open-ended subscription, which is also different than like, isn't it not being there mean I want to remove it? Or does it mean I want to keep it the same? So, I mean, I think subscribe update in particular is where like a lot of these things get pretty messy. I think your principle otherwise for the like straight up like commands, it's like, if you need it, put it there. But yeah,
this totally makes what sense. I think that what I'd be proposing here, and I wish I'd done a slide on it, I just didn't think about this enough until this conversation, was that we should have subscribe update actually requires values. Whether they're encoded across the wire or not, it's a different question. That's an encoding question, but it actually requires a semantic value of don't change or remove, right? In some of these values. And so we should
and I think the other question is like, if we just, we think about what we want subscribe update to look like. And then let's say if we landed on using parameters, that also filters back to like, okay, well, since we're doing it this way for subscribe update, we should do this a similar way for subscribe or not. I guess we don't have to do it that way. We can let subscribe update be its special, implementation, and the other messages can work differently. It's just what I think where Ian was going was like, okay, well, if we just make everything parameters, then like some of this stuff just shakes out, but it may not be the most principled thing. I don't know.
I think I like Colin's like TV framing and subscribe update. If subscribe update and subscribe are both TV and or not all of it, like name and namespace clearly. Like you don't specify name and namespace in subscribe update because you can't change them, and you have to in subscribe. So yay, we're all set on that. I'd have to go through some of the other stuff to figure out, the details of required versus like TV, but I think we can figure out a spelling that doesn't end up with too much duplication or awkwardness. That makes sense. But I generally would take the opinion that you should be able to send a subscribe update with as few as like just the request ID and a single tag field thing to update, and not have to respecify the whole thing because it's a bit chatty on the wire. And I know people have already complained that you have to update 10,000 subscriptions, like things can get pretty chatty. So that's my preference as a high level concept.
So look, maybe just, whoops, I'm trying to edit the wrong page here. Maybe just to fix that, how I would put that into this framework then is this has a common value, which is no change. And this same for this and same for this.
Yep, that works for me.
Probably also the same for forward.
Yep, 100%. So once we do that, though, we do come back to the question. So that's a subscribe update. We come back to the question of, in a subscribe, does not having it mean the value is 128, or does it mean no update, right? And we get, because they're different commands, we can have a different common value. But I think that, like, that's, you know, that's the one we're going to come up to.
I think you could declare the identical by, like, you know, making your struct constructor for a subscription, like, initialize that value to 128, and if, you know, you don't specify it, then you don't change it from the initialization construct.
Oh, I see. Right. The initial value is 128, and then the what was sent over the wire was no change. That's right. Right. Okay. It's subtle, but I like it, Ian. Will.
Yeah, just a question. Cullen, you opened up by saying that we cared less about the compression for a control channel because it's infrequent and we're not sending it all that often. Yet it seems a lot of these schemes, in fact, what Ian just mentioned, was there that we don't have to send items and it's less chatty and it's sort of looking like compression. Whereas I would think we want something that's bone dead simple here, that we don't have to have this complex dependency in order to interpret it, just to save some bytes, which we upfront declared that we're not too worried about sending anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I should have been clear. I said I don't care much about compression of the control channel traffic. I care deeply about the data channel. I'm not. It seems that the amount people want to do this suggests that other people do care about the compression or not. I mean, maybe somebody else can speak to how much we care about doing this versus just always sending every value in every command.
For me,
it seems simple to me. Send every value all the time. You're not going to make a mistake. I can easily understand that, and so can everyone else writing the spec. But I'm going to send some values not the time. Some are common values. Some depend on whether they're common based on other things, and there's some state involved to understand it. It just seems we're going a lot of complexity that we don't really need because we don't really care too much about how large our control message is. And we're talking bytes, not kilobytes.
So I have a slightly different, I don't really care about the size of the control messages on the wire. I think for subscribe update in particular, I like a spelling of subscribe update, which is, I'm going to tell you the things I'm going to change rather than I'm sending every single thing I told you before. I think there's more error prone that I might accidentally change something I didn't intend to. But I'm less concerned about that. The other thing is that if you've seen Martin's like error parsing or like error message consolidation PR, like I kind of like that because you just end up with less total code, because all like more and more messages end up being the same for the parser, and that like I you know, in terms of reducing test matrices and stuff, I kind of like that, but I don't want to do anything too unnatural at the same time. I don't think we're going to end up with HTTP where there's like one request type and one response type, and then, you know, a million little options in the middle. That wasn't necessarily a win for us. So somewhere in between, I think, is where we'll end up.
I think I'm sort of more on the will end of this because I think the parsers are the most trivial portion of the code, and that they instantly represent it into an internal structure. And that internal structure, the closer it is to what's on the wire, the easier. But I'm certainly not going to stand in the way of this, of whichever way we go. I don't care. I was trying to represent in these slides what I sort of thought the group was pushing towards, you know, that was something we could all live with. But, you know, we could easily change these encodings a little bit. But I don't think that changes the underlying problem, which is what is the extensibility model and which one of these need to be understood where.
I don't know if Will is still in the queue from before. I guess I had another clarifying question. Oh, when it comes to TV, are you thinking that those V's will be something other than the kinds of V's that we can currently represent in parameters, which are either integers or a length blob? Like, is it going to be like a location or some other like semi-complex struct? because that appeals less to me, but I want to understand what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that like any value, the same type of whatever restrictions we have on fields, the values that go in a field apply here too. So so certainly the bulk of the examples we have today are var-ints or maybe a string, or sorry, an array of bytes, not a string. So we definitely need var-int and array of bytes. Look, if we wanted to be able to encode locations as one of the values, I'd have zero problems with that as well. I mean, we have a parser that parses locations. If that's a defined thing in us, it's a little, two var-ints, great. I think we'd do the same thing here for these values. I wouldn't see any reason we'd restrict them differently than anything else.
It might be nice to do bools because we've talked about that before, and then you just have a type that means this is true.
Yeah, actually, I sort of assumed we would add bools in it too. That's true.
I guess this is sort of a question for me and for Ian. Do we feel like we have enough signal to take the set of parameters PRs we have now and refine them in a way that matches this?
I think so, but I would like clarification on. Okay, so for now, we're going to leave parameters as they exist. Like, we're not removing parameters from anything, correct? We're not messing with parameters. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't remove the parameters struct. I mean, I guess I need to sort of digest these slides. So Colin, please post them so we can take a look.
But there might be.
I'll post these immediately after the call. I will also go and reread all the PRs on that and be like, hey, this one seems like it should be, effectively this groups our stuff into, it should be T, TV, or TLV, right? And we could just do a pass over checking we were all on the same page of which of those categories things were in.
There are a few things that are in parameters today that I do not think are optional.
Yeah,
and I think probably we mostly agree on this. And so I would want to move them into the TV section if the theory is like these are not at all. Castration is like one of them. I mean, it's like that was never intended to be something that like you can't you can choose not to implement. So.
Colin, I'm going to ask one other thing, which is that the general stuff at the beginning of the presentation about like how we approach extensibility, can I maybe have you condense that into an email to the list so that we just can have like follow up on, these kinds of things, like you shouldn't extend a value or like filter type or those sorts of rules. I don't think we have any more time to talk about them here, but that was a really important part of this presentation. I don't want to lose it. That discussion thread.
Sure. I'm sure it'll all be recorded in the minutes too.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is...
I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to, because you're busy, let me know and I will try to condense your recommendations and send it out as an email just so that we can kind of like have that going.
I'll work on something. Sounds good.
Okay. Is it okay if we move on to, because I want to get a little bit of signal on a few open issues and PRs, unless there's more we want to close on here.
Go for it.
Okay. I don't know. Is it easy if you want me to try to request a screen share and put things up, or should I just kind of talk about numbers?
Yeah, go ahead. I think we get it to work.
Yeah. Do I want to share my screen? Okay. Start. Here. Okay. This isn't actually what I wanted to show you. It's just some random tab, but I wanted to go through a few here. There's a ton, but okay. This is the one I want maybe some signal on soon. So we added this end of group bit in draft. It's either in I think we added it in 13. That basically let you in a datagram or in a subgroup say that in a datagram, it meant this object is the end of the group. And in a subgroup, it meant the last object in this group is the end of the group. And when I went to implement that, I found it hard. I think Martin found it hard. And my response was, let's change the spelling a little bit so that when you have that bit, what it means is there's actually an object that's one higher than the current object. And that is the end of group. And I'm just not sending it to you on the wire. Martin said, let's just remove this. So I think we should do one or the other before Monday. So does anybody have an opinion on that? Hold on, I got to get back to Meet Echo. There we go. I'll take myself out of the queue and then Colin.
I just want to be sure that by removing this, we don't significantly up the bandwidth of low bitrate audio. I guess I need to think about it more. Maybe you can just answer that.
I think it comes down to, like, I mean, you could also just not send end of group messages for your low bit audio. It just means that if somebody tries to fetch it through a cache, that cache might have to make an extra fetch upstream to understand that it actually had everything in the group. That's the consequence of not sending end of groups. Or you could send end of group and it's a 4-byte datagram at the end of every group. Although if you're doing one object per group, that does add 4 bytes per object, which is maybe
we're sort of doing it. And the thing too, if we're doing UDP, I mean, my concern is we're doing every audio packet is a new group, and we're doing UDP, and it's not it ups your packets per second, which is also, you know, that might change in QUIC. I know it doesn't quite, they might consolidate or whatever, but I don't know. It seems like it would be worth doing this. Figuring out a way.
I mean, I'm also inclined to keep it, at least keep it for datagrams. I see in the chat, Victor says that there's an alternate, he has an alternate proposal and wants to defer the discussion, but that means that whatever draft we cut next week is going to have the same broken state that the current draft does, which may be fine if nobody wants to implement it and we can fix it later. Martin? Martin Duke?
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what my problem with this is. And the +1 thing does solve the problems of the original proposal, what's in the draft now. But it does mean you cannot have extensions in the end of group object when you do this. I'm not a huge extension guy. I can live with that. But like the fact that I need to decide this like a priori when I start the stream just seems very sort of difficult and annoying. And yeah, that said, I don't know if, I mean, people have written the code or not written the code. I don't know that we need to fix it before the next interop.
Yeah, I think the signal I have is don't make any changes this time around, and we'll spend some more time thinking about it. Victor will have his proposal and we'll come up with something. Ian?
As an individual, I really dislike extensions in the end of group object. It's just like feels really, really wrong. I mean, the end of group object is basically a fin. It's just a way to spell it, right? In my mind, like it is not a thing. It's a fin. If you want an empty object with, you know, object extension headers, you can do that. That's allowed. We do not disallow that. But if you should not be slapping extensions, in my opinion, on a fin. It's not a thing.
Okay, I'm going to move on to just a couple other quick PRs that I do think are close. Just before we go, if I can, oh shoot, where did it go? I don't even know which tab. View tab. There we go. Oh, that worked. Okay. One of them is 1025. I think this is good. There was a change here that we basically, any extensions that are immutable get serialized as their own little block of extensions and then added as the value of a parameter, which is the immutable extension parameter. And it makes it so that relays can go ahead and add extensions and remove extensions to their heart's content before or after, you know, anywhere they want. But like this thing needs to be preserved so that it works. So I would like to land this. It just needs a more review and stamps, or if anybody, we don't really have time to discuss it here. So I guess please discuss on the PR. So that's one I wanted to put in front of people. And then I also really want to get an idea on what's going on with 1060. So, which I may even have some more feed. So this is, I'm going to hide the comments. Just whoops. Okay. This is the one about new group requests and how we want this to work. And there's a lot of momentum on this PR, but then I'm also hearing that there's maybe there's going to be some generic alternate proposal, none of which is materialized on the list or in an issue or in a PR. And so I guess I'm trying to understand from the signal, what does the group want to do? Do we want to land this? Do we want to wait till we see another proposal?
The last report from Will was he was going to have something ready for Toronto. So I think we should just table it until then.
No, let me just correct that right now. I've mentioned several times, Martin, we are not proposing a generic messaging construct here. I did discuss it with Mo at the last IETF, and it got very complex, and it basically descends towards inventing a messaging protocol embedded within MOQ transport. And we decided that was not valid. Whereas a group is a core part of the object model, requesting a new group we felt is pretty intrinsic to the transport. So we're not proposing anything else other than the current proposal that's up here.
Okay, so does that mean we can continue iterating on this PR, and when it's ready, we can land it and everyone's okay with that general plan?
Yes.
I think it's on me to write something else if I want to consider something else seriously, but I also think it'd be good to re-update this PR in light of what Cullen said today, because I might feel better about it if this new group request parameter was a required parameter and not. That concept might feel better. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I don't think this is ready this is not going to make the draft 14 cut. I don't think anybody's desperate to interrupt in it. So I think we'll keep the conversation going. We'll probably spend a little bit of time, hopefully, on it in Toronto, and maybe by then we'll get it to a solid place. But in the meantime, please review those. There's a bunch of other PRs open as well. Would appreciate reviews and feedback on any and all of them. I have put up a few that have not been discussed in the group before. I put a little RFC in front, which is not to say I definitely want it this way, but I'm just offering a straw man for people to poke at. So appreciate all the reviews from everyone. Oh, and one more thing. Chairs, did you want to talk about the consensus call for draft for 1213?
You are 2 minutes over time, just to time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, well, actually it was due yesterday. So if you have any comments on up to draft 13, please send it immediately after this meeting. And Magnus and I will wrap that up. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks on September 10th, same time as always. And we will see you then.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Martin, did you guys get slides from me?
I think he already left.
I think so too. Okay. No worries.